let's check out Copilot for security. Now, if you want to understand Copilot for security, then the first thing that you want to understand is how Copilot works. Now, if you want to understand how Copilot works, everything starts with this organization called OpenAI. OpenAI, what they done is they created a model. They created ChatGPT. But what they actually did is they took all kinds of information, like for example, everything on the open web, the internet. They took, for example, books and content of books. They took lyrics from songs. They took poems. They took what else? Transcripts of speeches, transcripts of TV, movies, and series, and everything. And well, much more information they took, and they put all that info into a model to learn. Now, so if you take this model like this, so there's a lot of pieces of information that we just put into that model. Basically, that is what we do. So there's all kinds of data. Then what we've done, we went and we went to go and train the model. This basically means you need a lot of time. You need a lot of processing power. Now, typically we think about CPUs. In training models, we very often also think about GPUs. And nowadays, there's also something called LPUs for language processing units. There is NPUs for neural processing units. So I have decided to create a new acronym, which is going to be the XPU, any processing unit. We don't care anymore about processing units. It's just a lot of stuff, right? This also costs a lot of money, but we are going to train the model. The idea is that we are going to go into that data set, the data that we put in. And now what we want to do is we're going to try and see if there is all kinds of relationships between the data in that model. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to look for relationships in that data. Very often this is referred to as parameters. So for example, if you look for example at ChatGPT, then some people say, hey, this is a 175 billion parameter model, right? So basically we do is we create those relationships between the data sets. This will result in something called a neural network. So this is what you get. It's a neural network. It looks a little bit like a brain. Or actually, it should operate a little bit like a brain. That's why they use the name neural. And if you think of it, it actually also works like a brain. We have been training the model. We test the model. We make it do stuff. We ask questions to the model. And then when we have that, when we get the right answers enough, right? So if you think, hey, now the model does what we want it to do, then we can basically go in and say, hey, this model is now finished. At ChatGPT, this, for example, would be GPT 3 or 5, 3.5 or 4, and the most recent version is 4.0. But basically, what we get is a large language model. The reason that we call this a large language model is because we have fed it so much information, right? We give it so much info that it is a large model. Now, we as ChatGPT users, OpenAI customers, we can go and connect to the model, being a person, and then we can start to make it do stuff. We can prompt the model. Basically, we can ask questions. We can make it do stuff for us, like summarize things. And that is basically what happens here. Now, one of the interesting things is if you look at this. So, for example, you can go into chatgpt.com nowadays, which is the new portal here. We can sort of make it explain stuff. So I can go say, hey, I want you to explain. I want you to explain quantum computing to me, and then what it will do, it will start to explain quantum computing. In the end, what is actually happening, it is just a a next word prediction engine. So it just is calculating what would be the logical next word in this line. That is what the results of the training is. And now we get to see how this explains quantum computing to me, based on the information that we have been feeding into the system. Now, the cool thing is it creates relationships between data that we as human beings might not even understand being a relationship. For example, one of my hobbies is to go and say, hey, now explain this again to me like Donald Trump. I can do that. So I can make it explain this to me like Donald Trump, and it will then actually start over. And it will go in and tell me about quantum computing, and it actually uses words that are that Donald Trump is known for. We get to see things like, hey, it's huge, it's massive. Quantum computing is the future, it's going to be big. Believe me, here's how it works in the simplest terms. Bits and qubits, it's a regular computers, but you got bits, they're either 0 or 1, very simple. But in quantum bits, there's quantum bit. Well, anyway. So basically, this will explain the same thing, but now it took something very intelligent and something very stupid, and it would combine this to each other. Interesting, isn't it? So it can do stuff because of the relationships between of all the data that we as humans would not think of. Now, it is a trained model, and if we train a model, at one point we just have to say it, now it's done. We have to stop training it. GPT 4.0, I think, has been trained until April 2024. So it doesn't know about everything after April 2024. Also, it only has been trained on public stuff. It doesn't know anything about my emails, for example. It doesn't anything that is not open. But one of the things that we could do is we could go and say, hey, but what if we want to get some extra info to give it answers? Now, this is pretty much, if you think about a human brain, then this actually is very comparable to a human brain. So the device, the model has been trained, and just like your brains, they have been trained at one point. So, for example, you have been born, then you got parents, and you have brothers and sisters, and you live in a certain environment. There's weather, like now, there is rain. I told you so, because we're in Norway. There is rain. Then we have been trained until this very second. And I can ask you a lot of different things. I can ask you things about something that I'm sure of that you know. I can ask you about, hey, what happened on September 11, 2021? What happened there? And everybody in the world will pretty much say the same, well, at least they will talk about the same things. It doesn't mean that they are going to say the same things. Some people think that the attacks on the World Trade Center actually were set up by Al Qaeda. Some of them think it was an inside job, right? Some people think very differently again. So with that, it's everybody's brain is trained in a different way. Now I can ask you all about that stuff, and all of your brains will be responding in a way that makes sense for that people, those people with that brain. But what if I now ask you a question about something that happened to me yesterday? Yesterday evening, I have been running, and I can ask you, for example, hey, was there a better route for me to run yesterday? Now, your brain is not able to answer that question for me because you are lacking the knowledge. Because if you need to be able to answer if there was a better route for me to run, you will have to know what I did run, the route that I used, where I have been running. you need to know information about the location and know about maybe the running parts that are there. But without that extra information, you will never be able to give me a proper answer. But we can give that in the prompt. Basically, we can go and say, hey, instead of just you know asking, we're going to add the extra information, and this is referred to as RAG. This is short for retrieval augmented generation. So basically, this is the extra information that you require to answer the prompt properly. So for example, I can start a new chat, right? And I can go and say, hey, I am Alex. I am 49 years old. I am cool as Michael Scott, who is very cool, obviously. I'm cool as Michael Scott. And I have been traveling a lot lately. I can give that for information, right? That's awesome, Alex. Traveling sounds exciting. Okay, cool. Now I'm gonna ask a question. So what should should I do with this argument that I had with my girlfriend yesterday? Yesterday. Oh, by the way, she hates my traveling. Now, because I am actually giving it extra info, it will help me with this question. It will maybe tell me something about traveling, and for example, it says something about the duration of my trips. Maybe we have some more quality time together. Actually, we can even seek professional help. Yeah. So that's something we can do here. So now, because of adding the extra info in, we get better info out. But the model, the brain, is not being trained on my extra info. The brain is just the brain as it is. So if you think of this, a large language model is very much like a brain. It's trained until a certain date and time, and we can ask questions. And if the brain doesn't have the answers, we can provide information so it can generate the answers. Pretty decent. Now, this is what happens in OpenAI. But now let's take it to Microsoft. Because at Microsoft, we do Copilot stuff. So in Microsoft, if we run Copilot, any Copilot, what we basically do is we will take this LLM created by OpenAI and we store in one of the Azure data centers in our service boundary as a customer. We will store a copy of that LLM, which is a read-only copy. It's a read-only copy. So it's just sitting there. Now, we can have a user, and that user can use a client solution to, in the end, run a prompt towards Copilot. Copilot is here. Copilot has a very important component, which is an orchestrator, which is responsible for handling all the stuff. So the user can go in, and the user can go and send a prompt into Copilot. Here we are, doing the prompt. Then, basically, what we need in this prompt is extra info, so the let's say the generic brain can answer the questions or can do the stuff for us. So a very important part of Copilot is the location where we are getting the extra data from. Now, typically we refer to as a graph in this case. And there is different types of graphs. There is, for example, the Microsoft graph. The Microsoft graph is where all your Office data is stored. Emails, chat messages, calendar items, documents in OneDrive, document in SharePoint, and so on, right? That's your Office data. There is another graph that is the Azure Resource Graph, which allows you to make use of Copilot for Azure. The Microsoft Graphs allows you to use Copilot for Microsoft 365. There's also there is also the security graph. And the security graph is about data that is stored in Intune and in Purview and in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and Entra ID and that stuff, right? So this is, if you think about Copilot for security, then it basically is going to connect to another data set to use as retrieval augmented generation. So what will happen in here is that it will first go and then connect. It will sort of search for the data that we need here. Then that will return extra information, which is the RAG data again. Then we take that RAG data to the LLM, which is the generic trained brain, which is the copy that we get from OpenAI. Then we are going to send that into the LLM. We are getting the response back, right? This is the response that we get. And with that, we can now also respond to the user. Now, this is a simplistic way of explaining how this works, especially when it comes to, for example, Copilot for security. Then actually, Microsoft has been retraining this model. So what we did is so we have the original LLM. And then we did some extra training on it. So we did some additional training here for specific data that comes from Microsoft Security Intelligence. Microsoft has a lot of security intelligence. Why do they have a lot of security intelligence? Because they run the biggest freaking environment in the planet. Because they run a solution where there is billions of users every day doing billions of different things that are all related to security, and we monitor all of that stuff and we understand what's going on. We have the smartest people, and therefore we can train that model better. Now, with that additional training, that model is able to do very specific things when it comes to security based on the data in the security graph, which is Defender for Endpoint, Intune, and so on. But also it allows us to, for example, communicate with third-party data sources. So, for example, pretty much anything would be allowed here. So, for example, you may have data stored in, I would say, ServiceNow, which is a help desk tool, or maybe Splunk, or somewhere else, right? There's so many different data sources that we can now also add into this mix. Now, this is sort of in short how Copilot for security works. This is how the mechanism works. If you want to enable it in your organization, we can go into, we want to go into Microsoft Security Copilot.com, I think. I might be wrong. Yeah, Microsoft Security Copilot.com. Sign in. What? What? This does not seem like the right site. Do you mean Microsoft.com? Well, I think I was looking for Microsoft Security Copilot.com. No. Let's just, you know what? Huh? No, I think it is a come on, security Copilot portal. Let's go. Oh, securitycopilot.microsoft.com. Okay. Yeah, this is it. You. Yeah, I know I don't have access. That's, come on, I should be able to do more with this. What was it? Security copilot.microsoft.com. I am me, which I think is important. Okay, typically what you will be asked to do first is you go into the Azure portal, because in the Azure portal, if you want to enable this, you can go and search for Copilot, and here we can use the Microsoft Copilot for security compute capacities, and I want to create a capacity here. So in this case, I'm going to put it in my special prepared thingy here. Then I want to purchase, I want to create a capacity name, let's say sec Copilot, run it in Europe. Europe West is all right, one is all right, so I'm going to click next, and I want to create one of those items. Basically, this is the way you pay for Security Copilot, using those compute units. And the idea behind this is that from here we don't really get to do much other than see that we are using one. As you can see, there is not a lot of options in Azure for this. So now let's try and go back in. Come on. How do not have access to this? I'm pretty sure I have. That is. So let's open up a in private window, see what happens. Security copilot.microsoft.com, and then see if it allows me to sign in. So I'm gonna sign in as being me. Oh, yep, I wanted to do this. 49, I think it has been guessing my age. Ooh. Yeah, so yeah, this is better. So apparently, right, so I created my capacity now. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So I created the capacity. Now I have to select which one I want to use. Oh, am I not? You know what? Let's create a new one here as well. Doesn't matter. So I have to tell in what environment I want to create the capacity. A name, sec Copilot 2. Now I can check out I say let's go into Europe. Compute units. I'm going to acknowledge this and I'm going to create this. So what I've done is now I have via the website I have created a compute unit. They cost you $4 per hour. If you want to if you're done with one, so here if I check out my Azure portal here, check out my Security Copilot. Here I have two now, right? So maybe the first one, I'm not going to use this. So to save money, I'm going to delete it. This is the portal here. So it's now sort of getting closer to allow me in. So I have to select, come on. Why am I not allowed to select the one that I have created? Because, now we have the option, sec Copilot 2, that's the one I want to use. And now, in this environment, I can now start using Copilot for security. Now, this environment lets me prompt stuff. Now, like I mentioned in this drawing, if I prompt here, then it will now go and check, for example, where it wants to get the extra data from. And here in the little sources box that we have, we can actually make choices. So for example, do you want to get information from, I don't know, Azure Firewall or Azure Web Application Firewall or External Attack Surface Management, Threat Intelligence, XDR, Entra, Intune, Purview, which is not available at the moment, Sentinel, some QAQL components, non-Microsoft solutions are here as well. As you can see, there's a long list. There's one for ServiceNow, there's one for Splunk, there's one for Darktrace. So we can have, basically what we can do is we can add all kinds of extras in here. And if we have made that decision, we could, for example, go and say, hey, can you compare all Windows clients based on hardware? Just give that as a prompt. And what you will notice when you run a prompt like this, it will then go and it will sort of start looking for the plugins we are using, and it will sort of think about, hey, which of the data locations are going to be useful for the prompt that I am pushing out. And that will then in the end, so it's now checking all the plugins and it's going to sort of see what my question is. It says, hey, we choose Intune for this. Summarize differences between devices. That's the prompt that I want. It's going to prepare the response. And now I get a message that says I could not do that with the device something. Please ensure device names are provided. So, but typically what you get here is that it will basically help you out figuring things out. But if you go into the Intune portal, because that's actually what I was trying to get to, is that in Intune, because I've enabled Copilot for security, in Intune, we now have, for example, all kinds of Copilot capabilities. So if I check out my devices here, I can go in and, for example, select one of the devices that I have. And now I have, for example, Copilot that I could use to explore this device. So I can basically go and click a link. I can go, hey, you know what? Summarize this device. And then what you do see, by the way, Copilot and security in Intune is it's not really allowing me to be freely in writing my prompts. It sort of comes with predefined prompts for typical Copilot tasks. So here we get to see some basic information about this device in Intune. So it's gathering that stuff out of the data set. But if I want to do other stuff, for example, I can go back up. I say, hey, maybe I want to compare this device to another device. So the other device is, for example, my son's laptop. I want to focus on configuration profiles. And now I'm going to have Copilot create those results for me as well. So in Intune, Copilot is more like a fixed solution. You are not very free in to ask whatever you want. So that's, for example, also why not all of my prompts here will easily work. But it will basically go and tell a little bit about the differences between those. Another nice thing we can do is, for example, when you create policy. So we went here, and if we do configuration, if I create a new policy, for example, if I choose templates, let's say device restrictions here, we can go in and choose all kinds of settings. And here we get to see the little Copilot logo again. So we can click on that, and it will then sort of explain to me in Copilot what that is. It's tell me about Intune setting Microsoft account, and it will then do the same thing. So we basically, Microsoft in Intune now has a lot of this extra Copilot buttons available for me to sort of get me the extra info that I usually would not have. So if you want to use, oh, actually, okay. Oh yeah, and now because I only purchased one compute unit, it's very easy to sort of overuse it, so I don't get to get much more information out of this. But Copilot for Intune is based on Copilot for security, and it allows us to do some basic comparison monitoring things. Copilot for security in general can do very cool things, but that is it can, for example, also connect to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and we can, for example, ask about devices that might be vulnerable to a certain vulnerability. Or we can ask questions like, hey, show me a list of Windows devices that needs to be updated. Or that kind of thing. And it will then tell you if there's an actual attack happening in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So if we go into defender.microsoft.com here as well, we can also dive into actual vulnerabilities using Copilot for security. So yeah. Okay, so for example, here in let's say in incidents and alerts here, in my case, I do have not too many incidents, so it's not super cool at this point. But here on the right hand side already, based on my incident, Copilot for security is going to get me information about what is happening here, and it actually could get us some guided response. So in my case, I have to be a little bit patient. So my compute units are sort of free for me now. But I would actually get maybe information about, hey, what does this mean? What would be the next step to protect my environment? Is there something that you want to send to the user? Here's an email ready for you to send to the user. Oh, by the way, your bosses probably want to get like a full review on what's happened. You know what? Click on this button. We will create a PowerPoint for you. You can then present whatever is about this event to your bosses. This is what Copilot for security can do for you. Super cool? Yes, it is super cool.